Imagine waking up one day, in the midst of an ordinary morning, only to find that the reflection staring back at you in the mirror is not quite your own. The eyes are the same, the face familiar, but something feels fundamentally wrong. Your image looks almost unfamiliar, as if there's a stranger lurking beneath the skin, a quiet presence that has always been there, watching, waiting. This stranger is not an external threat, not a shadowy figure lurking in the dark. No, this is a part of you, a part that has been there all along, quietly influencing every decision, every thought, every action. And now, for the first time, you see it for what it truly is, the shadow. What does it mean to face your own shadow? To confront the deepest, most hidden aspects of yourself that you've spent your entire life avoiding? For most, this encounter is not only unsettling but terrifying. You might ask yourself, why would I fear something that is, after all, part of me? Why do we run from the very thing that is intrinsically connected to our identity? Why does something so familiar feel so foreign, so alien? The shadow is a paradox, a part of you that is so deeply buried in your psyche that it has become invisible, yet it exerts more influence over your life than you realize. You might think you know yourself, but you don't, not completely, not until you face the shadow. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, argued that the shadow represents all the aspects of the self that we repress or deny. These are not necessarily evil traits, but parts of our personality that we deem unacceptable either to others or to ourselves. The things we do not want to admit exist within us. The envy we feel toward a friend's success, the desire for power that lurks beneath our calm exterior, or the unresolved anger we carry from childhood. The shadow is the sum of all those bits of ourselves we push away, often without even realizing it. And in denying these parts, we give them power. Think about it. When was the last time you were confronted with something that triggered an intense emotional reaction, a sharp pang of jealousy, anger, or even guilt? Chances are, in those moments, you are encountering your shadow. These emotions arise from the aspects of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. The very things we hide are the things that shape our actions, often in ways we cannot see. And so, we continue to live our lives as if we are whole, as if we know who we are, while the shadow waits patiently in the background, shaping our decisions from the shadows. But what would happen if we were to face the shadow directly? If we stopped running, stopped pretending that it doesn't exist? What would it be like to accept the dark, uncomfortable parts of ourselves and integrate them into our conscious identity? Is that possible, or would it destroy us? Here's where the real question lies. Can we ever truly embrace the parts of ourselves we fear most? Is there a point of no return when confronting the shadow, a point where we risk losing ourselves entirely, or is the shadow the very key to finding our truest selves? You can already feel it, can't you? The tension between fear and curiosity, a whisper urging you to turn away, and another voice, deeper and more insistent, beckoning you to turn towards the shadow, to face it head-on, to understand it fully. To know that the stranger in the mirror is not an enemy, but a companion, a reflection of all that you are, and all that you could become. But, as with all things that carry such profound weight, there is no easy answer. The journey to confronting your shadow is not a linear path. There are no neat conclusions, no simple solutions. The more you peel away the layers, the more questions arise. What does this shadow mean for your identity? How much of it have you allowed to shape your reality without even realizing it? It is not a question of whether you can live without it. It's about whether you can live authentically with it. And that is where the real challenge lies, in accepting the truth that your shadow is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, something that, once integrated, might just unlock the deepest and most potent parts of yourself. So, how do you move forward from here? How do you begin the process of confronting the shadow? To answer that, we must first understand where this fear comes from. Why do we avoid our shadows? What are we really running from? The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. At the heart of the fear of our own shadow lies a deeply ingrained psychological and existential struggle. We are conditioned to believe that to be whole is to be a perfect, harmonious self, an identity free of contradictions, dark impulses, or unwanted desires. From the moment we are born, society begins to shape our understanding of who we are supposed to be, and any part of us that doesn't fit neatly into this mold is discarded, repressed, or denied. This process is so subtle, so ingrained in our socialization, that we rarely notice it happening. The shadow becomes a natural byproduct of this conditioning. The parts of ourselves that are unacceptable are pushed into the darkness of our unconscious mind. Carl Jung identified this struggle as an essential component of the human experience. He argued that the shadow is not inherently negative, it is simply the part of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. In essence, the shadow represents all that we have cast aside in order to conform to societal norms, to meet the expectations of others, and to create an identity that is palatable to the world around us. But in doing so, we lose touch with the true richness of our own being. The more we push these qualities into the darkness, the more we forfeit our full potential. Jung's work on the shadow draws heavily from the concept of the unconscious mind, the vast hidden expanse of our psyche where our fears, desires, memories, and impulses reside, often without our awareness. He believed that, unless we confront this unconscious material, it exerts an overwhelming influence over our lives, shaping our actions and reactions in ways we cannot control. This is why the shadow feels so threatening. It is the part of ourselves that has been hidden away for so long that we are no longer familiar with it, yet it still governs our behavior. But this fear of the shadow is not merely psychological, it is also deeply philosophical, and this is where we begin to confront some of the most unsettling truths about human existence. Thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre grappled with the existential consequences of acknowledging the shadow. Nietzsche, in particular, emphasized the need to confront and embrace one's darker nature in order to achieve a more authentic existence. He saw the shadow not as something to repress, but as something to transcend. The so-called will to power that Nietzsche described was, in part, about harnessing the energy of the shadow and using it to fuel creativity, personal growth, and self-overcoming. For Sartre, the existential dilemma was rooted in the concept of bad faith, a kind of self-deception where we lie to ourselves about our true nature in order to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth of our freedom and responsibility. We are free to choose our actions, but this freedom also entails the burden of responsibility, including the responsibility of acknowledging our full, unfiltered selves, including the shadow. By denying it, we remain in bad faith, trapped in a false version of ourselves. The fear of the shadow, then, is not merely a psychological defense mechanism, but an existential crisis. It is the fear of confronting the totality of our being, the aware. That we are not just the person we project to the world, but also the person we hide from ourselves. The paradox here is that by denying the shadow, we deny our own freedom, our own power, and our ability to live authentically. In other words, to be fully alive requires us to integrate the parts of ourselves that we fear most, to reconcile our contradictions with courage, not avoidance. Yet, despite the philosophical and psychological insights offered by these thinkers, the shadow remains a deeply unsettling presence. Its pull is both seductive and destructive, calling us to confront the darkest corners of our identity while also threatening to shatter the fragile constructs of our self-image. How do we reconcile these contradictions? How do we face our most uncomfortable truths without losing ourselves in the process? In order to understand the full scope of this dilemma, we must first look at how the shadow manifests in our everyday lives. What does it look like in action? How does it influence the choices we make, the relationships we form, and the way we see the world? The answer to these questions lies not in abstract theories, but in the unseen consequences of living in denial of our shadow self. The unseen consequences. When we deny the existence of our shadow, its influence does not vanish. Rather, it manifests in ways so subtle, so deeply woven into the fabric of our lives, that we rarely notice it until it reaches a tipping point. The unseen consequences of ignoring our shadow are profound and pervasive, shaping everything from our relationships to our personal sense of fulfillment to the very lens through which we view the world. One of the most insidious ways the shadow influences us is through projection. a psychological mechanism where we attribute our own unwanted traits, desires, or emotions to others. Have you ever found yourself inexplicably irritated by someone's arrogance, only to later realize that you harbor a similar, unacknowledged trait within yourself? Or perhaps you've found a self-admiring someone for a quality that you secretly wish you had, all the while failing to recognize that this quality is already within you, buried in your own shadow. This tendency to project is a direct result of our refusal to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that we deem unacceptable. In rejecting these aspects, we create a kind of psychological blindness, projecting them outward onto others. This phenomenon plays a significant role in how we navigate our relationships. When we fail to integrate our shadow, we begin to form relationships based on an incomplete, distorted view of ourselves and others. Our interactions become colored by projections. We attract people who reflect back to us the very traits we refuse to accept within ourselves, or we push away those who remind us of the very parts of our nature that we wish to deny. We may find ourselves caught in toxic dynamics, repeatedly falling into patterns of jealousy, resentment, or conflict, all of which are fueled by our unresolved inner contradictions. The shadow also exerts its influence on a deeper, more existential level. It shapes our sense of purpose and fulfillment, often without us even realizing it. For example, many people spend their lives chasing after external markers of success, wealth, status, achievement, only to find that these pursuits feel hollow or unfulfilling. This emptiness is often the result of ignoring the deeper, shadowed parts of ourselves, the parts that are yearning for authentic expression. We may convince ourselves that we want fame or material wealth, only to realize later that what we truly crave is something far more profound, a connection to our deeper, truer selves. This cycle of disillusionment and existential frustration is what psychologists like Viktor Frankl have referred to as the existential vacuum, a sense of emptiness that arises when we live inauthentically, disconnected from the core of who we truly are. Frankl believed that the search for meaning is at the heart of human existence. Yet when we neglect the shadow, we sever our connection to this deeper meaning, leaving us adrift in a sea of superficial goals and fleeting pleasures. The shadow is the source of true meaning, for it holds the full spectrum of human experience, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the grotesque. On a societal scale, the consequences of collective shadow denial are equally profound. Cultural conditioning, mass consumerism, and the constant bombardment of idealized images from social media have led to a widespread collective shadow, a societal refusal to acknowledge the darker aspects of human nature. This collective denial manifests in a number of ways: in the glorification of superficial beauty, in the demonization of vulnerability, in the persistent pursuit of perfection, and in the normalization of unhealthy societal values like competition, status, and materialism. This societal shadow is what drives many of our most toxic cultural narratives: the need for external validation, the pressure to conform, the obsessive pursuit of power and success at any cost. By collectively repressing our shadow, we create a culture that encourages disconnection from our true selves, a culture that prioritizes the false self over authenticity. The more we project these shadowed aspects onto others, be it through political polarization, racial prejudices, or social divides, the more we contribute to the collective sense of alienation and despair that pervades modern life. The consequence of ignoring the shadow is not just personal, it is collective and global. When individuals and societies refuse to face the darker parts of themselves, they become increasingly fragmented, disconnected, and out of balance. This fragmentation is what leads to social unrest, environmental degradation, and the growing sense that something is terribly wrong in the world. But here's the most chilling part. You are not immune to this process. The shadow does not remain a distant, abstract concept. It operates within you, shaping your thoughts, your actions, and your reality. Every time you dismiss a difficult emotion, every time you avoid facing uncomfortable truths about yourself, you are reinforcing the very systems that keep you trapped in a cycle of projection, disillusionment, and self-deception. The longer you deny the shadow, the more it controls you, often without you even realizing it. At this point, you may be feeling the weight of the consequences. Perhaps you recognize parts of yourself in the descriptions above: Perhaps you see patterns in your own relationships or your own sense of unfulfillment. But here's the crucial question. Can you break free from this cycle? Can you reclaim control over your shadow, integrate it into your life, and live authentically? To answer that, we must shift our perspective entirely. The rebellion. How to break free. The idea of embracing the shadow, the very thing we have been taught to fear and avoid, seems, on the surface, utterly counterintuitive. How can we face the darkness within ourselves without losing control? How can we integrate the parts of us that seem so destructive, so uncomfortable, into our conscious identity? This is where the true rebellion begins, not in fighting against the world, not in defying external forces, but in defying the internal forces that have kept us imprisoned by our own minds. The first step in breaking free is to recognize the shadow for what it truly is. Not an enemy, but a mirror. The shadow is not some external force trying to pull you down. It is you, or rather, a part of you, a part that you have long neglected. Facing the shadow is not about changing who you are, but about rediscovering who you have always been beneath the layers of self-deception. To do this, you must stop running from your fears, your flaws, and your suppressed emotions, and begin the arduous process of reclaiming them. Jung argued that the shadow is not something we can simply rid ourselves of. It is a fundamental part of our psyche that must be integrated, not eradicated. This process of integration is not about fixing ourselves or achieving perfection. It is about accepting the totality of who we are, both the light and the dark. In fact, the more we try to resist the shadow, the more power it gains over us. True liberation lies in embracing it fully, in allowing it to become part of our conscious self. To do this, you must confront your fear head-on. When you experience feelings of shame, guilt, anger, or jealousy, don't immediately push them away. Don't suppress them or run from them. Instead, sit with them, feel them fully. Ask yourself, what part of me is being triggered right now? What aspect of my shadow is revealing itself through this emotion? This is not an easy task. It requires vulnerability and courage, but it is only by embracing the uncomfortable truths within you that you can begin the process of reclaiming your full self. To understand how this works, look at the examples of those who have historically embraced their shadow and broken free from its constraints. Think of figures like Nietzsche and Jung himself, who faced their own darkest fears, doubts, and desires. These were men who did not shy away from the contradictions within themselves. Instead, they used their shadows as a source of creativity and transformation. Nietzsche's declaration to become who you are was not an invitation to indulge in selfishness or destructive behavior. It was a call to accept the totality of the human experience, both the good and the bad, and to use that acceptance as the foundation for personal growth. Consider the case of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, confronting the very nature of his own suffering and anger. He did not ignore or the shadow of his rage or the injustice he endured. Instead, he faced it, integrated it, and transformed it into a force for profound social change. Mandela's life is a testament to the power of embracing the shadow, not as an enemy, but as a source of strength, resilience, and transformation. There is also Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the founder of logotherapy, who used his time in concentration camps to explore the depths of human suffering and meaning. Frankl argued that the search for meaning, often found in the darkest places of existence, was the key to transcending suffering. He did not deny the reality of his pain, nor did he ignore the brutality around him. Instead, he chose to find meaning in it, to confront it directly, and to use it as a catalyst for his own spiritual growth. Frankl's ability to confront the shadow of human suffering ultimately led him to develop a psychological approach that helps others confront their own inner darkness. So, what does this process of rebellion look like in practical terms? It begins with an awareness, a conscious decision to confront the parts of yourself that you have long avoided. Start by paying attention to your reactions to others. Are you often irritated by people who display traits you dislike? That's your shadow speaking. Rather than distancing yourself, ask why you are so affected by them. What do they represent about you? Take a deep dive into your emotions and explore the root causes. Embrace your feelings, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. Over time, you will begin to understand that these emotional triggers are not external. They are reflections of your own unacknowledged inner world. Another powerful tool is self-reflection through journaling. Writing allows you to explore your thoughts and emotions from a distance, helping you see patterns that might otherwise remain hidden. By regularly journaling your experiences and feelings, you create a safe space to confront your shadow, your fears, your regrets, your unspoken desires. This act of self-exploration can be a powerful step in integrating the shadow, turning it from a destructive force into a source of personal insight and growth. Finally, surround yourself with people who encourage authenticity. People who are not afraid to confront their own shadows. Authentic relationships provide a mirror through which we can see ourselves more clearly. When you allow others to see your shadow, and when you witness theirs, you begin to break down the barriers of pretense and disconnection that have been created by society's idealized standards of perfection. The road to breaking free from the shadow is long and arduous, but the reward is worth it. A life of greater authenticity, deeper meaning, and a more profound connection to your true self. The ultimate truth. The final, most powerful realization. When we finally come face to face with our shadow, when we begin the laborious process of integrating all the parts of ourselves we have long denied, we reach an extraordinary moment of realization. This is the final truth that reshapes everything we thought we knew about ourselves, the world, and our place in it. It is the paradox of self-knowledge. To truly know who we are, we must first face who we are not. The shadow is not just an accumulation of repressed traits or negative traits we wish to avoid. It is the source of our deepest creative potential, our truest essence. When we integrate the shadow, we unlock a power within ourselves that is far more than just the sum of our fears and flaws. This realization is the ultimate truth of the human experience. We are both the light and the dark, and in embracing both, we reclaim our authenticity. At this juncture, the truth becomes clear. The shadow was never the enemy. It was the key to unlocking our true potential. Every time we avoided the shadow, we stifled our own growth, shackled ourselves to an incomplete and fragmented version of who we are. But once we embrace the shadow, we unlock the wholeness that has always been within us, waiting patiently for us to stop running and start living fully. This is where the teachings of Carl Jung come to their deepest and most transformative conclusion. The journey towards self-realization is the journey toward integrating the shadow. This does not mean merely accepting the darker parts of ourselves. It means allowing these parts to guide us, to teach us about our fears, desires, and untapped potential. The shadow holds within it the very keys to our freedom, if only we dare to open the door. In psychological terms, when we integrate the shadow, we experience a transcendence of the ego. The ego, in Jungian psychology, represents the conscious self, the mask we present to the world. It is the aspect of our personality we identify with the most. But when we integrate the shadow, we dissolve the rigid boundaries of the ego and allow ourselves to become whole. We transcend the false self we have spent our lives building and embrace a new identity, one that is fluid, dynamic, and deeply authentic. This is a liberating and awe-inspiring realization. For so long, we believed that our worth, our identity, and our place in the world depended on rejecting the parts of ourselves we considered dark or undesirable. But in reality, our greatest strength lies in accepting, not rejecting these parts. Only then can we truly become who we were always meant to be. Take a moment to imagine the depth of this insight. What would it mean to live a life unburdened by the need to hide your shadow, to show up in the world fully, unapologetically and authentically? To speak your truth without fear of judgment, to express your desires without shame, to embrace your flaws without guilt. Imagine the freedom that comes with knowing that you are not perfect, but that your imperfections are what make you whole. This is the ultimate realization. Your shadow is not your burden. It is your gift. It is the part of you that holds the deepest wisdom, the rawest creativity, and the most authentic expression of who you are. Once you stop fearing it, once you stop avoiding it, you tap into the boundless potential within you. You begin to see the world differently as well. When you embrace your shadow, you see others through a more compassionate lens. You stop projecting your own repressed traits onto them and start recognizing their shadows as reflections of your own. This creates a profound shift in your relationships, both with yourself and with others. You understand that everyone in their own way is grappling with their own shadow, just as you are. And instead of judging, you begin to empathize, recognizing that in facing our darkest selves, we are all walking the same path. This is not just an abstract philosophical concept, it is the path to authentic living. It is the road to liberation. The final truth is this: when you accept your shadow, you not only free yourself, but also unlock the power to shape your life according to your truest desires, to live in alignment with your deepest values, and to transcend the limitations that once bound you. So, where do you go from here? Now that you know the shadow is not your enemy, but the key to your freedom, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue to fear the parts of yourself you have hidden away, or will you step into the light of your full, authentic self? The choice is yours. But remember, the shadow will always be there, quietly waiting, urging you to face it, to integrate it, and to live fully. For in embracing the darkness, you will find the light. And in that light, you will discover the truest, most powerful version of yourself.